You know that feeling when someone you care about says something that just cuts right through you, and your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, and suddenly you're not even sure what you're arguing about anymore? You just know it hurts. You know that feeling? That moment where the conversation completely derails and you find yourself saying things you never meant to say, and doing things you never meant to do, and then lying awake at 2 a.m. replaying every single word, wondering how it got so bad so fast? That is not a you problem. That is not a them problem. That is a pattern. And today we are going to break it completely. Because here is what nobody tells you about conflict. It is not the argument itself that destroys relationships, it is the silence after. It is the distance that grows one unresolved conversation at a time. It is the way two people who genuinely love or respect each other slowly start to feel like strangers. And if you have ever been in that place, if you have ever felt that cold, aching distance after a fight that should have been a simple conversation, then stay with me, because what I am about to share with you is going to change everything. People who master conflict resolution do not have fewer problems. They do not have easier relationships. What they have is a completely different set of tools. And the people who figure this out early stop losing sleep over arguments within weeks. They stop dreading hard conversations. They start actually feeling closer to the people in their lives after disagreements instead of further away. That is not luck. That is a learnable skill. And before we go any further, I want you to know there is a program linked in the video description below. If you are serious about transforming how you handle conflict starting immediately, go check it out now, because not everyone who needs this actually takes action on it. And that gap between knowing and doing is exactly where most people stay stuck forever. But let us get into this, because you deserve the real truth about what is happening when conflict explodes. When you are in a heated argument, your brain literally hijacks you. There's a biological process happening where your nervous system reads the emotional threat of conflict the same way it reads physical danger. Your heart rate spikes. Your thinking brain essentially goes offline. You are no longer operating from reason. You are operating from survival. And here is why that matters so much. Every harsh word, every cold shutdown, every time you stormed out or they shut down, that was not weakness. That was biology. But biology is not destiny. Think about the last real argument you had. Not a disagreement, a real one. The kind where voices got louder, or maybe one of you went completely cold and quiet, which is somehow even worse. Do you remember that moment where you could feel it starting to spiral? That tipping point where part of you knew this was going wrong, but you felt completely powerless to stop it? That moment is actually the most important moment in any conflict, and most people have never been taught what to do with it. The people who resolve conflict fast are not the ones who never get triggered. They are the ones who recognize that tipping point and do something radically different in that exact moment. They buy themselves just enough time to shift from reaction to response, and that shift, that tiny window between stimulus and response, is where all the power lives. Here's something that will sound almost too simple, and I need you to really hear it. The fastest way to de-escalate almost any conflict is to make the other person feel understood before you make any attempt to be understood yourself. Not agreed with, not validated in every belief they hold, just understood. There is a profound difference. When someone feels genuinely heard, something physiological actually changes. Their nervous system calms, their defenses lower, and suddenly they become capable of actually hearing you. But if you skip that step, if you jump straight to defending yourself or explaining your position, you are essentially speaking into a wall. The wall is not being stubborn. The wall is a nervous system in threat mode. This is why so many arguments go in circles for hours. Not because the people in them are unreasonable, but because neither person ever felt safe enough to actually listen. You have probably experienced this, that exhausting loop where you say the same thing 5 different ways and they still seem not to get it. That is not a comprehension failure. That is a safety failure. The conversation never became safe enough for real understanding to happen. Now let us talk about what happens in your body and your life when conflict stays unresolved, because this goes so much deeper than just bad moods and awkward dinners. Chronic unresolved conflict is one of the leading contributors to anxiety, sleep disruption, and even physical health problems. People who carry ongoing relational tension report dramatically higher stress levels. The mental overhead of managing a strained relationship, whether it is at work, at home, or in a friendship, is exhausting in ways that are hard to even articulate. You are carrying something heavy every single day, and over time, that weight compounds. Walls go up, intimacy drops, productivity suffers. People who study organizational behavior have found that unresolved conflict costs organizations thousands of hours of lost productivity annually. But the personal cost is what really breaks people. The lost sleep, the replaying conversations, the anxiety before interactions with someone you are in conflict with, the way it bleeds into everything else in your life. Now flip that completely. Because the transformation that happens when someone truly masters conflict resolution is extraordinary to witness. Relationships that felt damaged or even dead start to breathe again. People describe it as a weight being lifted, but that undersells it. It is more like finally being able to exhale after months of holding your breath, and it does not take years to see this shift. People who apply these principles consistently see real change in days to weeks, not months or years. The tension starts to dissolve almost immediately, because the dynamic fundamentally changes the moment you respond differently. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into a difficult conversation that used to leave you anxious for hours beforehand, and instead of that familiar dread, you feel something close to calm. You have a framework. You know what you are doing. You know how to navigate the moment when things heat up. You know how to help the other person feel safe enough to actually hear you. And instead of that conversation leaving you drained and distant, it actually brings you closer. Instead of lying awake that night replaying what went wrong, you sleep because you know you handled it well. That is not a fantasy. That is what happens when you stop winging conflict and start navigating it with actual skill. Here is a truth that most people resist at first. In almost every conflict, there are two things happening simultaneously. There is the surface argument, the actual topic you are fighting about, and then there is the deeper emotional need underneath it. And the real conflict is almost never about the surface topic. The argument about the dishes is almost never about the dishes. The blow-up about being late is almost never about time. Underneath almost every escalated conflict, there is a need for respect, or acknowledgement, or reassurance, or connection. And when you learn to hear the need underneath the words, you stop fighting the wrong battle entirely. This is one of the most powerful unlocks you will ever experience in your relationships. Because suddenly you are not trying to win an argument. You are addressing what actually matters. And when you do that, when you reach past the surface and touch the real thing underneath, people feel it instantly. The whole energy of the interaction shifts. It sounds almost impossibly simple, and yet it is the thing that most people never do because they are too focused on defending their position. Let me give you something concrete you can use right now. When a conversation starts heating up, before you say another word in your defense, try this. Lower your voice instead of raising it. Lean in slightly instead of pulling back, and say genuinely, help me understand what this is really about for you. Not as a tactic, not as a manipulation, but because you actually want to understand. What that does to the emotional temperature of a conflict is remarkable. People are so conditioned to expect defense and counterattack that genuine curiosity stops them completely. And in that pause, something can actually shift. The most trusted communicators, the ones who seem to resolve tension almost effortlessly, are not operating on superior intelligence or superior patience. They have internalized a set of principles and practices so deeply that they become instinctive. And instinct comes from repetition, from having a clear method and applying it consistently until it becomes who you are rather than something you remember to do. Here is something I want you to sit with for a moment. Every conflict you do not resolve is a relationship you are slowly closing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but brick by brick, silence by silence, avoided conversation by avoided conversation. And at some point you look up and realize the closeness that used to be there is just gone. Not because of one catastrophic event, but because of 100 small ones that never healed. You know this feeling. You have probably already lost something to this pattern. Maybe a friendship, maybe a relationship, maybe trust with someone at work. That loss is real, and it matters. And the devastating thing is that so much of it was completely preventable. But here is what is also true. It is not too late. It is almost never too late to change a dynamic when you change your approach. Because when you show up differently, the relationship has no choice but to respond differently. It cannot stay the same. The pattern breaks the moment you stop feeding it. The people watching this who go on to genuinely transform their relationships are not the ones with the easiest situations. They are the ones who decide that staying stuck costs more than changing. They are the ones who recognize that the cost of inaction, the lost sleep, the damaged connections, the daily weight of unresolved tension, is far more expensive than investing in real, lasting change. And if you are feeling that now, if something in this video has landed in a place that feels true and urgent, then do not walk away from that feeling without doing something with it. There is a program in the video description below that takes everything we have touched on today and goes so much deeper. Most people will watch this and feel inspired for an hour, and then go back to the same patterns tonight. The ones who do not, the ones who actually change, are the ones who act on the moment when they feel ready. That moment is right now. Go check out what is waiting for you below. You have already waited long enough to feel at peace in your relationships.